In general, people, really did respect their veterinarians in terms of the advice that they gave surrounding vaccination.
Right.
But there are probably other groups in other regions that don't want to vaccinate or are concerned about side effects of vaccines.
Welcome to the Purr Podcast, your favorite feline-focused podcast, where we dive into all things feline, medicine, surgery, behavior, and of course, a sprinkle of veterinary gossip along the way.
I'm Dr. Jolle Kirpensteijn, feline fanatic, surgery nerd, and self-proclaimed lover of all things awkwardly cat-related.
And I'm Dr. Susan Little, proud cat vet, podcast enthusiast, and your guide to the wonderfully weird world of feline medicine. Let's get started.
Hello, this is Dr. Jolle Kirpensteijn.
That's your FM voice.
I know.
That's Jolle's FM voice.
Yes, it is. It was good, wasn't it?
It was good.
Okay.
That came from deep within.
It's a Purr Podcast, by the way.
And I'm Dr. Susan Little. And we've once again had a very novel opening. We never do the opening to the podcast the same way twice.
We don't.
Never.
We have 200. This is like 244.
And they're all different.
And they're all different.
Yeah.
And they're very often messed up by someone. We will not mention who the person is, but when you're on YouTube, you can see.
There's often an awkward silence because Susan's caught off guard.
Susan started this year really well by not remembering her name. that was
So for context for our listeners, we're recording this in Las Vegas at the Western Vet Conference, and it's the first in-person recordings we've done in months, I think. Yeah, and so, I was a little rusty.
A little rusty, yeah. So, before we start, I would like to do a dedication.
Yes, I think you should. I think we should.
This podcast is dedicated to a very special friend of ours.
Yes.
And do you want to tell the audience when we met this friend?
Oh, my goodness. Do I remember? Give me a clue.
So we're talking about Carlos Gabriel.
Yeah.
He is a cat vet in Rio. Was a cat vet in Rio.
We would have met him on that time that we were doing a bunch of lectures.
Yeah, I think we met him before because he is pretty well known cat vet.
Yeah. Okay.
We had a cat only practice in Rio. In Ipanema. So when we were there in Brazil, we went there. And
we visited his practice,
a good friend of ours. So he passed away very recently.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's fitting that we dedicate this episode, Carlos.
So yes, Carlos, hope you're well up there.
Yeah, Godspeed.
And we're thinking of you.
Yes. Our guest is Dr. Jane Sykes, who gets to be, maybe you're the inaugural Carlos Memorial podcast guest.
Very special.
It's an honor.
Yes, it is an honor.
It is. And I don't want to start with a sad note, but we're very happy that you're here.
We are. We've tried to get you before, but...
You have been before?
No.
You have never been on the podcast?
No, I've tried.
She's a virgin too.
We never...
Oh,
yes, she is. We've never quite hooked up timings, which happens a lot. But No.
Who am I? My brain is not functioning 100%, but I thought you were on the podcast before.
Yeah.
I always want to say repeat offender, but that's not the case.
No,
not yet.
No.
So you have no idea what will happen.
Yes, I have no idea. Completely unprepared.
Don't worry about it.
We'll try to be a little less crazy.
So the rules are we talk about cats. The D word is not to be mentioned.
No D's.
I know. So when we talk about lepto, don't start with the D. Cats. So the smiling cat on the side. And but we're very happy to have you here because we love infectious diseases.
Yeah, so do I, as you know.
Yes.
So that's why. And maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself before we start.
Yeah. Where did you grow up, Jane?
So I actually was born in Launceston in Tasmania, in Australia.
That is so cool.
From Tasmania.
Island girl, yes.
Really?
And then I grew up in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I went to vet school at the University of Melbourne. And then I did a cat PhD, which was on infectious...
Getting better and better and better.
My PhD was on feline chlamydia, herpes virus, and calicivirus infections.
Excellent. We can talk about that.
And was that at Melbourne? You did?
That was at Melbourne University under the supervision of Glenn Browning, who's a mycoplasmologist.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about that too.
We can.
Okay. Was Richard Mallett is involved in infectious diseases then?
Yeah, he was Sydney. He was at the University of Sydney.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I went to the University of Minnesota to do my internal medicine residency there.
My husband is a Minnesota grad. He's also a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I went to Davis after being on faculty for a year as a clinical faculty member at Minnesota. I took the job at Davis as Niels Peterson was going into phased retirement. So
such
I was
as he did,
stepping into some very big shoes, but had this awesome opportunity to take on a faculty member with a focus on infectious diseases of dogs and cats. And
which
so
doesn't
that's
happen
what
very
I've
often.
been doing.
Right?
Yes,
That's awesome. And then you slowly climbed the ranks to being full professor now.
That's right. And then I'm currently also the director for our Center for Continuing Professional Education at the school.
Oh.
That's cool. Is that the one that organizes the Muller-Urquhart thing too?
It used to be,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
But we are just about to have our inaugural Aggie Vet conference, which is going to be in May. It's going to be a multi-track conference.
Nice.
So very excited about that.
Nice.
Lots of things going on.
You were a hospital director for a while too.
I was also director of the hospital for about 5 years.
So you have a lot of free time, I guess.
I'm always ready to take on new projects.
Yeah. Don't say that too loud because people might respond to it.
But you know what they say? They say if you want something done, give it to a busy person.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
I'm an opportunist, like my opportunistic pathogens.
Yeah.
I like that.
No, that's
like
true.
that.
That's
We'll definitely talk about that. So I have to go back to Tasmania because a good friend of mine she moved there and she lives in Tasmania now. She used to be zoo vet and now she has a practice in Tasmania, and I so want to go because I've never been there.
It's a wonderful place.
One of the few
Cradle
places
Mountain
in the
is
world that I've never been.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
Lovely.
So it's on the list.
Mhm.
It's on the list. So
Yeah.
maybe we need to get a local with us that can show us around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'd be happy to go with you.
Excellent. That's
Do you go back very much?
I go back about once every 12 to 18 months. Tasmania about every 18 months.
Wow.
So you still have family in Tasmania, or are they
My
in Melbourne?
parents live in Melbourne.
They're in Melbourne, yeah.
Right.
But I always go back to Tasmania. My uncle and aunt live in the in-laws
Right.
still.
And how old were you when your family moved to Melbourne?
I was 2.
Oh, okay, very young.
But we used to spend all of the summer holidays in Tasmania right through school.
Right.
So my parents moved to Melbourne to kind of give my sister and I a better education than was available in Tasmania.
Yeah.
But my mother every summer would just send us to my grandparents in Launceston. So we would stay there for months every year.
So you've got a really good connection to Tasmania.
Yeah.
Gosh,
It's a
that's
very
lovely.
special place.
How are the Tasmanian devils doing?
Oh, well, they're okay, but
Are
they've
they
had their
recovering?
tumor
Right.
disease issues, but they're...
Did they ever find out? I mean, I think they found out what it's causing now, isn't it?
Yeah, so I actually don't know the details
Oh,
of what those studies ended up showing.
I think they found a cause, but I'm not totally sure anymore what it was. So I need to
Tumor
dig
facial
that out.
disease.
Yeah. So anyway, from Tasmania now at UC Davis. Is UC Davis still the #1 school in the world?
Yes, it is. Or in the United States,
Right.
it is the #1 school.
Right. So most of the time it's ranked really, really highly. A big school. It's a little bit outside of San Francisco, isn't it?
It
2
is.
hours?
It's about, well, it depends on the traffic. With traffic, it's about 3 hours. With no traffic, if everything goes well, an hour and a quarter.
Oh, wow. That's a big difference.
Yes, it
between
is.
the two. So I always am surprised about the weather in San Francisco, and then you drive an hour and a half if you're lucky, and then suddenly it's completely different.
So different. It is. It can be 100 to 110 degrees in Davis in the summer. It's
Crazy.
really hot. And then it's like 65 degrees
Right,
in
right.
San Francisco.
And foggy.
And foggy.
Right. You also have some side jobs, don't you? Next to what you do at Davis. What else are you doing in the world?
I have some side jobs, yes. I do a lot of volunteer work for ACVIM,
Right.
and I also just stepped down as chair of the scientific committee for WASAVA, and still volunteering for WASAVA and doing activities for them. And then I'm also this Ask a Vet columnist now for the Washington Post, which has been a completely different world that has really been fantastic. So every 2 weeks I write a column for the Washington Post, and I get to communicate to people who might not have good access to veterinary care and give really just basic information on general animal health care for companion animals.
So do you respond to questions, or do you write your column on however you want, or what's that dynamic?
They have people write questions in, so then I select questions from people who are readers of the Washington Post, and then I write a column.
That's so cool.
I just did one on declawing in cats.
Do you know
and what was the general conclusion here?
It was a really good column, and actually it's had the largest number of comments in the comment period, and so it's been a very popular one. And I present some of the more recent evidence for pain and other behavioral problems in cats that result from declawing. So a good opportunity to educate people about it.
It's almost coast to coast illegal in Canada. I can't remember who the holdout.
Do you know how many states it's illegal here in the US?
I think I put that in there. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't think it's a lot, though, is it?
It's a few.
Yeah,
it's a handful, and it's growing. California was the most recent one.
Right.
Okay. Might be
Good for California.
5 or 6. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's such a strange thing. It's a very North American thing. And it makes you wonder, how did that start? And why did we continue? I never liked declawing cats, right? I've been a vet a long time, but I can declaw cats. I could. And there was a while when I did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
No, that's exactly right. And I actually start off in the column saying that I was the owner of a declawed cat. And now, based on the evidence that's out there, I will not be doing that again.
Yeah.
And we just didn't know. We didn't know about the unintended consequences. All the studies now that have shown that cats actually bite more. So you could say, well, we're trying to decrease rash wounds, but now we're creating other problems and inappropriate urination issues that result from declawing. And so it's quite fascinating, and some really cool studies looking at force plate analysis of cats and degree of pressure that they put on the ground, and how there was really good evidence now that they have quite, as you would expect, chronic pain.
So it's good. And in our practice, it's always, whenever something that's so well established and so entrenched, and you're trying to decide not to do it anymore, that's kind of can be a hard decision to make. Right. We noticed that gradually over time, there was just less and less and less clients asking. And so when I kind of became aware of that, I thought, let's just stop. And we stopped, and hardly anybody noticed. I think I can remember 2 clients who called and, still wanted a procedure for their new cat. They've been long-time clients. And I stood firm, and I said no. And they said, okay, we'll go elsewhere. And I said, that's fine. I'm still happy to be your vet for whatever else. But other than that, hardly anybody noticed.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things is that it's in the United States. It started in Los Angeles, just in the West Hollywood area of Los Angeles. They were the first place to, it was just this tiny little, and then it spread to other cities in California, to San Francisco, and then Denver. And so it's kind of been kind of random in these different locations, and then, multiple states having legislation.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It'll initiatives like that reach sort of I don't know what you call it. They reach a certain point, critical, right? Critical mass or what? Yeah. Right. And that certainly is what happened in Canada.
So how did you get the job at the Washington Post? Did someone just reach out to you and say, hey, Jane, you're a perfect person?
Yeah, well, so they have an Ask a Doctor columnist. Her name's Patricia. It's hard to say her name, but she's at Harvard. And so they were looking for a vet from an academic institution, a top academic institution. So they reached out to Davis because of the reputation it had, and because I'd done a lot of interviews for the media on infectious disease topics. They already knew me and communications on campus, and they said, would I be interested in doing this? And so I was like, I can't really say no to such an amazing opportunity.
You can put it on your CV now.
Yeah,
that's not going to come around again.
For Washington Post. What was the latest post you did on an infectious diseases? Cat.
Yeah, I did one on vaccine hesitancy in cats. So that was a cat one that I did recently.
Yeah. So what's your take on, I guess, the status of vaccine hesitancy? I think, so just from our perspective, I think we saw more of it during and right after COVID. COVID did not help, at least our local area. So I'm interested to see what you think.
Yeah, and there's still not a lot of good studies really looking at it broadly. There's been studies of different groups, like Jessica Pritchard's done some studies at Wisconsin showing that in general people, really did respect their veterinarians in terms of the advice that they gave surrounding vaccination. But there are probably other groups in other regions that don't want to vaccinate or are concerned about side effects of vaccines. So I think it's probably quite mixed from region to region and different groups of people.
Yeah, which just shows you that it takes almost a multifactorial approach, right? You have to know in your area, like what might be the key issues. And sometimes it's even just by the demographic in your area, right?
So my question,
can't have, in other words, you can't have like a spiel that's for everybody.
That's right.
So my question is then, we know measles is coming up in people because of vaccination issues. Do we see these trends of certain diseases that we haven't seen for a while in the US coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think for cats it's particularly difficult because actually a lot of people don't know that rabies is legally required for cats. And so many cats don't get rabies vaccines, but we have rabies as a difference between, animals and people, where you've got this disease that we know that if you don't vaccinate companion animals for rabies, it puts humans at risk of getting rabies.
And it's not fun to get.
That's right.
Yeah, the death rate is still...
But we also have really good vaccines, right, for FELV and other infectious diseases of cats, panleukopenia, etc. And there's a lot of opportunity to educate people about the importance of vaccination for those diseases.
And I can't remember who said that, but someone I talked to was living in the US, and he said that he started to see panleukopenia again. Popping up, and he hadn't seen it for years and years.
It never goes away.
Right,
it's always there.
But if you don't vaccinate, obviously you get more cases. That's.
Yeah, I think you see it, at least in my experience, you see it go up and down. It's always there. I mean, there's enough subclinical infections, right? It's always there.
And certainly shelters keep seeing it. They've been seeing it for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, so it really does depend on the demographic you look at, right? I think there's a couple of things that get in our way with vaccines, especially we're talking about cats. So I think one of the things that we have to learn to communicate better is, why do our kids go, right, and they get this like vaccine series and then they hardly ever get vaccinated again? It's not until you're at risk again, maybe you need a shingles vaccine, right? Whereas we insist on vaccinating, like depending on what you're doing, right, annually or every few years. And I think that's hard for
people to understand.
People to understand. And I think for, depending on who the person is, sometimes it just feels like we're doing it just because we want to do it. Yeah,
and we're actually going to have a series of sessions at Warszawa in Poland this year, where we're going to be talking about vaccine hesitancy and opportunities to kind of maybe reconsider what we're doing with vaccine protocols, given that there is more concern, or are there things that we should be maybe doing differently now that there is this issue of vaccine hesitancy out there. And so I think it's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, I think it's time at least to have the discussion, right? Because if you think about it, like core vaccine protocols haven't changed since, time began, really.
Although you see the shift from 1 year to 3 year, that was a big change. I think the resistance of vets moving from the 1 to 3 year vaccination schedule has also caused irritation. So I think we're partly cause of this, because if we know that we don't have to vaccinate every year, why do we do it? And that's why people are also.
Oh, you mean so people are like, oh, you could have been doing it every 3 years. Why didn't?
And even after the research came out that you could do it every 3 years and still have a good titer, still people were saying, no, I'm going to do it every year just to be safe. And there is no real good reason for that. And that probably rubs people in the wrong way too.
Well, I think for some vaccines that we maybe should be vaccinating more frequently for some pathogens and for others less frequently.
Right.
So we're also caught in the problem of having these combination vaccines that force a schedule. Right. And maybe we need to be talking about those too.
Yeah, I think separating out vaccines would help. It really would, because after a certain point, you don't need to vaccinate for panleukopenia, right? I would drop that for my pet patients, right? And even that might help owners if you say, oh, we can drop this one out now. But instead we insist upon, right? And sometimes people are using not just herpes, calicium, panleukopenia, but chlamydia in there too, right? And it's like flexibility would be so much better.
Well, other vaccines like rabies are mandated, so sometimes you will have to do that, and people forget about that too.
Is rabies mandated in all U.S. states?
It's most of them.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Okay. It isn't coast to coast in Canada because we have areas like Newfoundland has had a rabies case since forever.
So if you're rabies free,
not mandated, and they're not commonly given in Eastern Canada either.
Yeah.
There's just such a.
Yeah, Holland has been rabies free for a long time, so I don't think that we vaccinate routinely for rabies.
Yeah, but once you hit Quebec and Ontario, then yes, rabies is mandated by our public. It's actually not. It's mandated by public health units.
But in US, you have human cases still of rabies.
Yes,
that's the scary part. So it's not only that you see it in animals and in some populations like bats, where you cannot, it will probably live there forever. But in humans, that's for a first world country. It's pretty rare. Yeah.
And there was this amazing story. This is one of the most amazing infectious disease stories relating to rabies that I've ever come across, of this soccer tournament that occurred in North Carolina, where there was kids coming from multiple different states on the East Coast to this soccer tournament. So people from all over. And then some kids found a kitten in a trash can adjacent to the soccer field. And they were playing with the kitten, and it was all being passed all around these people and these kids in this soccer tournament. Lots of people got exposed to the kitten. And then this family decided to take the kitten home with them. And they got home, and then the kitten started looking sick within 24 hours of them bringing the cat home. So they took it to the vet, and the vet didn't actually think about rabies, and the kitten ended up getting euthanized. And the new people who had adopted the kitten went back home, and the mother started to worry about rabies and wonder whether or not the kitten had rabies. And so she went back to the vet and said, do you think that this kitten could have had rabies? And the vet said, well, I guess it's possible. And they still had the kitten for testing, and they tested it, and it was positive for rabies. And so then at least 50 people had to have post-exposure prophylaxis, and there were other kittens in the trash area as well.
There's usually more than one.
So it's just the most amazing example of where an owner, like a non-veterinarian, thinks about this and brings it to the attention of a veterinarian.
She was, that's quite good. She was spot on.
Amazing.
Yeah. A little bit in defense of veterinarians, right? It may not be the first thing you think.
That's right. Yeah,
because it isn't the commonest, and it depends on what they look like. I mean, a sick kitten looks like a sick kitten.
Exactly. I totally
right. I think in cats it's even more difficult to differentiate. On the other hand, I think that if you go outside of the US, where rabies is a really, really big problem, and most of the time it's caused by the D bite, so the lesser species biting little kids and that sort of things, you can almost, I don't know if it's eradicating or eliminating, I never know which word it is to use, but just by vaccinating the Ds in that region. That's, I mean, it is a kind of a preventable disease in those regions. And if we would have more vaccines and more people and, better knowledge about it, we can, rabies would be on one of those lists that we could not worry about it anymore.
Well, there are like some places in the world, like India, for example, would take a pretty, there's already campaigns to vaccinate animals in India, but it's a big problem. I have never seen an animal with rabies. I've never even, until recently, saw a video of an animal with rabies. And I was on one of my trips to South America last year. Alexander Danielle, who I know you know, has seen a cat with rabies. And I don't know how we got talking about it. And I said to him, I've never seen it. He said, oh, let me show you. And he, pulled out his phone where he had a video of a cat with rabies and showed me. And I'm like, holy Toledo.
Yeah.
This was full blown, sort of like furious, Like, holy Toledo.
Yeah. And one of the things that I said in the column was to the people who say, what about our indoor cats? Do they need to get vaccinated for rabies if they're indoors? And there was actually an example, I think it was in the Netherlands, where a bat got indoors and a kitten was exposed. So
it's easier than you think. Ontario had its first case in a human that was locally acquired within the last 2 years. I think it was last year, might have been the year before. And you think, we haven't had a case, and then boom, it's another one that's just lurking out there.
Yeah, that brings an interesting question up too for infectiologists. Is the warming of regions in the US that normally do not have certain diseases, and we see these infectious diseases coming up.
Yeah.
Is this something that you see in Davis, for instance, because your climate is pretty dry and hot?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of interest in fungal diseases with global warming, and that's one of my research areas, as well as lepto, which is another climate change related disease. But diseases like cryptococcosis, definitely, I think we are seeing more histoplasma infections in cats in California and more cryptococcosis. And so there's definitely the possibility that that's associated with climate change.
Wow.
This is a great topic to talk about.
When you say that, I know that you mean we're almost at the end of the first episode, aren't we?
I know. So fast.
I know.
So much to talk about.
I can tell just by the way you.
Feline infectious diseases
and there's so many more.
Yeah, there's so many more.
Sporothrix. We could talk about sporothrix.
Sporothrix.
Yes. I think we should. Yeah. Second half. We'll talk. We'll start with sporothrix. Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
really
you.
Fun.
Yes.
Yeah, Jolle, you did very well with the infectious diseases. Jolle's a surgeon.
Yeah,
just reminding everybody.
I can't cut them out.
And Susan is the closet virologist. Right. And so I usually dominate infectious disease. You did very well.
I did tell her we're not going to talk about FIP. Because
he did.
I
didn't agree.
We've done FIP.
I didn't agree.
We've done FIP. We have got quite a lot of UC Davis people that are experts in FIP, so we have the joy to speak.
I think that'll be something to talk about for a while yet, though.
And when we have Steve Dale on, he only talks about FIP, so it's all good.
Okay.
I didn't say the D word once.
No, you didn't. You are so good,
Good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're the first one of this
collection
couple of sessions that have not mentioned the D word at all. And we were very nice to the others.
We were.
Didn't even slap them down.
We were.
Right.
Yeah. We gave them a podcast sticker anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Normally it's a bowl of wine, but that's we need to reinstate it. This is the Purr Podcast, where we talk cats, laugh a lot, and learn something new every episode. Together, we bring you the latest updates, surprising cases, expert interviews, and just a touch of chaos, because nothing with cats ever goes as planned.
So whether you're a seasoned veterinary pro, a new grad, or you're just here for the cat puns, you've come to the right place.